Mr. Olympia is the biggest trophy in bodybuilding. The Super Bowl, the World Cup, the ultimate goal. Right now, two Russian bodybuilders are taking over social media. Andrei Smaev, Sergey Danilov, both weigh over 340 pounds. When these Russian giants stand next to Mr. Olympia champions like Chris Bumstead and Hati Chopin, they make these champions look like mere teenagers. So, if size is what matters, why haven't bodybuilders this big ever won Mr. Olympia? Some of the biggest bodybuilders in history actually came close. They placed second, third, fourth. They even looked more massive than the champions, but they still lost. In bodybuilding, sometimes bigger is not always better. These are the stories of 8 bodybuilders who were too big for Mr. Olympia. Greg Kovacs. Greg Kovacs was the biggest bodybuilder who ever lived. He stood 6 feet 4 inches tall and weighed an unbelievable 420 pounds, about the weight of a full-grown male lion. His arms measured an astonishing 27 inches around. His chest stretched 70 inches across. He was so enormous that a normal doorway wasn't even wide enough. He had to turn sideways just to get through it. Honestly, the human body was never built to carry that kind of size. Greg burst onto the bodybuilding scene in the early 1990s.
The American premiere of Greg Kovacs, one of the strongest bodybuilders alive, at the mere age of only 21.
And immediately started winning smaller competitions. Even among professional bodybuilders, he looked completely out of place. Judges had never dealt with anything like it before. Then came 2004. This should have been the moment everything finally came together. Greg stepped onto the Arnold Classic stage, one of the biggest bodybuilding competitions on Earth. And you won't believe what happened. He finished 13th, 420 pounds of muscle, and he still couldn't break into the top 10. How did that even happen? Because Greg had become too big for Mr. Olympia. In bodybuilding, there comes a point where more size starts working against you. His body simply couldn't burn off enough fat to reveal the deep muscle cuts judges wanted to see. Under the bright stage lights, he looked less defined than competitors who were much smaller than he was. Greg fought his own body with everything he had. He ate less. He trained longer. He added more cardio. He took more drugs. Nothing changed. His body had reached a point where it simply couldn't get lean enough to win. But what was happening inside him was even more frightening. People who trained with Greg watched him struggle through short cardio sessions before rushing to throw up. He battled for breath during workouts that most untrained people could finish without much effort. Years of insulin use did something shocking to his body. It caused his internal organs to grow along with his muscles. As those organs expanded, they pushed outward because there simply wasn't enough room left inside his body. And all that extra size came with a brutal price. Every second of every day, his heart was forced to pump blood through 420 pounds of tissue. Then, in November 2013, his body finally reached its limit. Greg suffered heart failure. Paramedics rushed to his condominium in Mississauga, Ontario, and fought to save him. They couldn't. He died at just 44 years old. He spent his entire life chasing size. In the end, the very thing that made Greg Kovacs famous became the thing that killed him. Nasser El Sonbati. Nasser never even wanted to become a bodybuilder in the first place. Growing up in Germany, he loved soccer. In fact, he used to say he thought bodybuilders looked ugly. One day after a match, he walked into a small gym with a friend, planning to do a few leg exercises to help his game. That's it. Then a Hungarian weightlifter looked at him and saw something nobody else did. He told him, "You can be the greatest bodybuilder in the world." Nasser believed him. Within 2 years, he was competing. A few years after that, he was over 300 pounds of muscle. People started calling him the professor. He spoke 7 languages, held university degrees in history, political science, and sociology. He often wore round glasses through brutal workouts, looking more like a quiet professor than a 420-pound mass monster. By 1997, Nasser had built one of the biggest physiques bodybuilding had ever seen. He stepped onto the Mr. Olympia stage against the defending champion, Dorian Yates, who was chasing his 6th straight title. Then came the results. Dorian won. Nasser finished second. Nasser was furious. He strongly believed he should have won. Years later, even Ronnie Coleman and Jay Cutler looked back at that contest and basically said, "We think the wrong man won." Nasser never got over it. Years after retiring, he was still openly accusing judges of stealing the first position from him. He called the sport evil and corrupt. Now, here's the real reason Nasser never won Mr. Olympia. He was simply too big. At around 315 pounds in the off-season, his body couldn't lose enough fat to reach the level of conditioning the judges demanded. Even at 300 pounds, he still had visible abs, which is almost unheard of. But at the Olympia, visible abs aren't enough. Every part of your body has to be razor lean. Your glutes, your lower back, your hamstrings, every muscle has to be fully defined. On March 20th, 2013, Nasser El Sonbati died in his sleep during a visit to Egypt. He was just 47 years old. Years of extreme bodybuilding and heavy steroid use had destroyed his kidneys and severely damaged his heart. He was too big for Mr. Olympia, too big to get lean enough to win, and eventually too big to stay alive. Marcus Rühl. Bodybuilding wasn't Marcus's first dream. Growing up in Germany, he wanted to become a professional soccer player. Then, a serious knee injury ended that dream almost overnight. His doctor told him to start lifting light weights to rebuild the muscles around his knee. At the time, Marcus weighed only 120 pounds. But when he saw how much his body was changing due to these exercises, he fell in love with bodybuilding. And soon, he began competing. Then, something life-changing happened. That day, Marcus Rühl walked into a bodybuilding competition thinking he was huge. Then, the elevator doors opened. Out stepped Paul Dillett. Marcus looked at him and thought, "What the hell am I doing here? This guy is twice as big as me." That moment got stuck in his head. From then on, he decided to get bigger, much bigger. Nobody could have guessed what would happen next. A few years later, he weighed over 300 pounds. But getting that big came with a price. To keep all that muscle, Marcus had to eat more than 8,000 calories every single day, whether he was hungry or not. He later admitted the constant eating destroyed his digestion. His stomach hurt all the time. He wasn't enjoying food anymore, he was working for it. When Marcus stepped on stage, he didn't look human anymore. His shoulders stretched to around 60 inches across. His arms measured about 24 inches. When he hit a front double biceps pose, it looked like someone had stacked muscle on top of muscle until there was nowhere left to put it. Fans couldn't get enough. His 2002 Night of Champions victory is still talked about today as one of the freakiest physiques bodybuilding has ever seen. So naturally, everyone expected that size to take him all the way to the Mr. Olympia title. It didn't. His best finish was 5th place. Imagine how frustrating that had to be. The judges kept seeing the same problem. Marcus had become so unbelievably wide that his body no longer looked the way they wanted. His shoulders completely dominated his physique. The size that made fans stare was the same size that kept costing him points. Then one day, Marcus did something almost no bodybuilder in his generation managed to do. He quit. By then, his body had sustained several injuries. Other men who trained the same way, at the same size, are dead now. Marcus started a supplement company instead. He is still alive, he is still healthy, but he never won Mr. Olympia. His size was just too extreme for what the judges wanted to see on that stage. Paul Dillett. Paul Dillett walked onto one of the biggest bodybuilding stages in the world, and before the competition was over, he was dead. The crazy part is that none of this was supposed to happen. Before bodybuilding, Paul played professional football in the Canadian Football League. He was already big, already athletic, already powerful. Then he started lifting seriously, and his body exploded. Within just a couple of years, people were calling him Frankenstein. At 6'1" and nearly 300 pounds on stage, he looked sculpted. His shoulders were enormous. His back looked like a brick wall. His legs looked like tree trunks. Everywhere he went, people stopped and stared. By 1994, Paul walked into the Arnold Classic as one of the favorites. This is one of the most prestigious bodybuilding competitions in the world. Paul. Everything was going exactly the way he dreamed. But just 30 minutes after he stepped on that stage, things took a horrifying turn. Paul tried to hit a front double biceps pose. His muscles locked completely, couldn't move his arms, his legs. Pain shot through your entire body. Then Paul started screaming, "Oh my God! Oh my God!" He couldn't stand anymore. He collapsed right there on stage. It took 4 officials just to carry him off because he was simply too heavy for one person to lift. Backstage, people begged him to drink fluids. He refused. He thought the cramps would pass. Half an hour later, he made a decision that still shocks people today. He walked back onto the stage. The crowd erupted. Everyone was cheering for him. They wanted to see him finish. Then it happened again. His entire body locked up. This time, he hit the floor and he couldn't get back up. Paramedics rushed him to the hospital. But then, things got even worse. Doctors tried to put an IV into his arm. They couldn't. His body was so severely dehydrated that his veins had collapsed. They tried again. Nothing. Again. Nothing. It took 4 attempts before they finally got a line into him. When Paul finally woke up, doctors said something that made such a huge man tremble like a scared little kid. "We had to revive you. You were clinically dead for 1 minute." Paul later said something mysterious about that whole experience. He shared that during the period he was out, he found himself standing in a strange blue space. He could see his dog about 30 feet away. He kept calling for it to come to him. The dog totally refused to go near him. Paul didn't even realize he was dying then. After the investigation, doctors found out exactly what stopped his heart. It was a chemical imbalance in his blood. Too much calcium, not enough magnesium. Someone had told him to stop drinking water and take diuretics in the days before the show to make his muscles look harder under the lights, and it nearly killed him. Paul said years later, "I was listening to someone I shouldn't have listened to." He survived, but he came back a different man. In later interviews, Paul said the experience rewired how he saw bodybuilding and how he saw his own life. He said everything looked different to him after being clinically dead for 1 full minute. Paul kept competing for another 12 years after that collapse. His best finish was 5th place at the 1997 Mr. Olympia. Why? Because Paul was just too big to safely dehydrate. At nearly 300 pounds, his body couldn't handle the extreme water cuts required to look shredded on stage. Every time he tried, he risked a second death. And if it happened, he would have been gone for real. Today, Dillett runs the World Beauty, Fitness, and Fashion Organization. He is alive. He is healthy. But he is remembered as the bodybuilder who collapsed and died on stage for 1 full minute because his own body could not survive what the sport demanded from it. Günther Schleierkamp. Before the trophies and magazine covers, Günther was just a farm kid growing up in Germany. Then, one day he picked up a bodybuilding magazine. Inside were photos of men like Flex Wheeler. That was it. He was hooked. He had only one goal now: get a big body like that of Flex Wheeler. He packed up, moved to the United States, and started chasing his bodybuilding dream. And honestly, his life was tough. He had almost no money. He slept in abandoned factories. He slept in cars. Some nights, he had nowhere else to go. He just lived like a homeless person. Then, just when things couldn't get much worse, he trusted someone to hold on to his savings because he couldn't open a bank account yet, since he wasn't a citizen yet. The person stole every penny. A lot of people would have given up and quit entirely. Günther didn't. He kept training. Eventually, he made it to Gold's Gym in Venice Beach, the place he'd only ever seen in magazines. Suddenly, he was standing beside Ronnie Coleman, Flex Wheeler, and Kevin Levrone. The men he'd spent years looking up to were now training beside him. It was a beautiful dream come true. As Günther practiced alongside these great men, his body started changing fast. By the early 2000s, Günther weighed more than 300 pounds in the off-season. His chest measured over 60 inches. His back looked unbelievably thick, like it was carved from stone. Fans couldn't stop talking about his size. Then came 2002. Just weeks after placing 5th at the Mr. Olympia, Günther walked into the GNC Show of Strength. Standing across from him was Ronnie Coleman. At that point, Ronnie wasn't just the best bodybuilder in the world. He looked unbeatable. He'd just won another Mr. Olympia. Nobody expected anyone to touch him. Then the results came out. Gunther won. For one night, the impossible happened. Gunther became the only bodybuilder to ever beat Ronnie during his 8-year reign as Mr. Olympia champion. You'd think that would be the beginning of a Mr. Olympia title. Wrong. Gunther would never win that title. Just 3 years later, Gunther's life fell apart. At the 2005 Mr. Olympia, Gunther placed 4th. It was his best finish ever. He was so close to the top 3. But in 2006, something went wrong. Gunther showed up to the Olympia looking off. His conditioning wasn't there. His body didn't look right. Instead of moving closer to the title, he dropped all the way to 10th. That could have been the moment he doubled down like so many others. Pushed harder, got bigger, risked even more. He didn't. Gunther looked at what his body was telling him and actually listened. He retired while he was still healthy enough to enjoy the rest of his life. Instead of spending years chasing one last comeback, he chose something else. His wife, his son, his future. Today, he's still healthy, still active in the bodybuilding world, and still respected by fans everywhere. And maybe that's the biggest surprise of all. Yes, Gunther never became Mr. Olympia, but he did something almost nobody else managed to do. He proved Ronnie Coleman could be beaten. Then he walked away before bodybuilding took everything from him. After seeing what happened to so many other giants, that might have been the smartest victory of all. Lou Ferrigno. When Lou was 3 years old, an ear infection destroyed most of his hearing. He lost 75 to 80% of it before he could even talk in full sentences. Other kids used it against him every day. They called him ugly names to his face and laughed when he could not hear them say it again. At home, it was worse. Nothing Lou ever did was enough for his father. So Lou found an escape. At 13 years old, he started lifting weights. He couldn't afford real equipment, so he made his own using a broomstick and buckets filled with cement. Every workout was about becoming stronger than the fear, stronger than the feeling that he'd never be good enough. And it worked. Standing 6'5", Lou grew into one of the biggest bodybuilders anyone had ever seen. He climbed all the way to the Mr. Olympia stage, finishing second in 1974 behind Arnold Schwarzenegger. Then came 1975. This was supposed to be his year. Instead, it became the day everything fell apart. On the morning of the competition, Arnold sat down for breakfast with Lou and his father. Then Arnold told Lou's father that Lou wasn't ready, that he was going to fail. And here's the part that hurts. Lou's father didn't defend his son. He even looked at him like a failure. That moment destroyed Lou's self-esteem. But Arnold wasn't even finished with him yet. Later that day, backstage, he found Lou again and asked him how he felt. Lou's answer said everything. "I'm going to lose. You're the best." Inside Lou's mind, the contest was already over. He walked onto that stage, feeling like a loser. He was visibly shaking. Lou came third place. The whole thing was captured in the documentary Pumping Iron, and it became one of the most famous psychological battles in sports history. Years later, Arnold admitted something that makes the whole story even more heartbreaking. He said Lou made one big mistake. He quit. Arnold believed that if Lou had kept competing, he could have beaten anyone in 1976 and 1977. Lou eventually left bodybuilding and became the Incredible Hulk, turning into one of the most recognizable faces in television. Years later, he returned to the Mr. Olympia stage, but the magic was gone. He finished 12th, then 10th, before retiring for good. So what really stopped Lou Ferrigno from becoming Mr. Olympia? A lot of people point to Arnold's mind games. They certainly played a part, but they weren't the biggest reason. Lou was simply too big. At 6 feet 5 inches and 275 pounds, his height worked against him. When you're that tall, building perfect proportions becomes incredibly difficult. Your legs start looking too long. Your arms suddenly look shorter by comparison. The bigger your frame, the harder it is to make every body part look perfectly balanced. Then there was Arnold. He stood 3 inches shorter. That was enough to give Arnold the look the judges wanted. And after Arnold got inside his head, he never truly believed he could beat him. Roelly Winklaar. Roelly Winklaar built what many fans still call the greatest arms in bodybuilding history, and they became one of the biggest reasons he never won Mr. Olympia. But before any of that, Roelly's life had already been turned upside down. When he was just 5 years old, his father died. His family left Curaçao and moved to the Netherlands to start over. Then, years later, just as life seemed to be settling down, disaster struck again. Roelly was involved in a horrific car accident. The injuries were severe. He almost lost his eyes. One of his arms was badly damaged. His condition was so terrible that for nearly 2 years, he couldn't train properly. Most careers would have ended right there. Roelly's was only getting started. When he finally returned to the gym, something incredible happened. His arms started growing. Then, they just never seemed to stop. They eventually measured around 24 inches. And here's the crazy part. Roelly himself said he never did anything special to build them. No secret routine. No magic exercise. They simply kept getting bigger, until fans everywhere started calling them the best arms bodybuilding had ever seen. Then came 2010. Roelly walked into the IFBB New York Pro, one of the biggest competitions outside the Olympia. And he won. Just like that, bodybuilding had a new star. Standing only 5'6", he somehow looked bigger than men half a foot taller. Everywhere he went, people wanted to see those arms in person. They didn't even look real. Then came 2018, his best year yet. Roelly placed 3rd at the Mr. Olympia. Then he won the very first People's Champ Award, voted for by the fans themselves. That tells you everything. The audience loved him. Many genuinely believed he should have won Mr. Olympia. So why didn't it happen? Here's where the story takes the twist nobody expects. The judges didn't see those arms as an advantage. They saw a big problem. They'd become so unbelievably large that they made the rest of his body look smaller by comparison. His chest didn't seem as impressive. His shoulders didn't seem as wide. Then, in 2021, disaster struck. Roelly tore his rotator cuff, a devastating shoulder injury that required surgery and brought his competitive career to a halt. Despite months of recovery, he has never returned to the Mr. Olympia stage. Roelly Winklaar stepped onto the Mr. Olympia stage 10 different times. He failed to win every single time. His arms were so enormous that they threw his entire physique out of balance. Fans loved him for it. They called him the People's Champion. But the judges never did. The People's Champion never became the actual champion. Quincy Taylor. Quincy Taylor became one of the biggest bodybuilders the world had ever seen, and he later admitted he was lucky to make just $20,000 to $30,000 a year. This man spent years pushing his body further than almost anyone else alive. He became a giant, and he still struggled to make a living. Quincy didn't grow up with an easy life. He was raised by his mother in the housing projects of Las Vegas. As a kid, he saw people got shot and killed mercilessly several times. One day, after getting mad at his mother over some domestic issue, he ran outside and started lifting homemade cement dumbbells. That day, it was just a way to channel the anger elsewhere, but he never stopped. By 16 years old, Quincy was already bench pressing 425 pounds and leg pressing 1,000 pounds. Coaches couldn't believe what they were seeing. He starred in football, wrestling, and track. Everywhere he went, people saw a future champion. Then, at 21, he walked into his first professional bodybuilding show. That was the moment everything changed. A reporter from Ironman magazine looked at him and said, "You're a natural. You should do this." Then Quincy watched Sean Ray posing on stage. He later admitted he'd never seen anything like it. Right there, he knew exactly what he wanted to do with his life. So he gave bodybuilding everything. And bodybuilding gave him one of the biggest physiques the sport had ever seen. Standing 6'4", and weighing around 360 pounds, Quincy looked enormous, even beside other professional bodybuilders. People couldn't believe someone could carry that much muscle. He wasn't just big, he was unforgettable. That physique should earn him Mr. Olympia, right? Well, far from it. He competed at the Mr. Olympia twice. He never won a major professional title. And then came the part that really hurts. Years later, Quincy admitted he was lucky to earn only $20,000 to $30,000 a year from bodybuilding. He'd built one of the biggest bodies the sport had ever seen. But fame didn't pay the bills. The judges kept coming back to the same problem. Quincy was simply too big. His towering frame was incredibly difficult to fill out evenly. His upper body overpowered his legs. His waist appeared wider than the judges wanted. Quincy Taylor became the biggest bodybuilder in the world. Ironically, that was exactly why he never became Mr. Olympia.